On an August night in 1970, an unsettling silence hung over the hospital. The white, impersonal lights of the lobby illuminated the tired faces of the few patients and staff on duty. Suddenly, the automatic doors opened, letting in a figure that seemed straight out of a nightmare. Dressed only in a white dress soaked in blood, a woman staggered in. Her empty, fixed gaze did not match the chaos surrounding her. The dress, once probably immaculate, was now stained with deep marks of blood, telling a story of horror without words. What truly paralyzed everyone present was not just the blood, but her disturbingly inhuman appearance. She looked like a mannequin brought to life, with incredibly perfect facial features, as if sculpted from porcelain, devoid of any human imperfection. There were no eyebrows, and her face was grotesquely adorned with heavy makeup. Every detail, from the lack of expressions to the strange perfection of her features, contributed to the growing discomfort of those watching her. Moving with surreal fluidity, she advanced through the lobby, each step resounding like a sinister prelude. No one dared to approach as she made her way, with unnatural calm, to a chair. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, each breath seemingly caught in the throat of those who witnessed her. It was then that one of the nurses, in an act of hesitant courage, finally approached. With a trembling voice, he asked if she needed help. The woman did not respond, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Without any resistance, she was taken to an examination room, her expression remaining unmoved, almost as if it were a mask. As the doctors prepared to examine her, a dark foreboding hung in the air. What would happen next was something no one could predict, but the feeling that something terrible was about to occur was palpable. As the woman was led to an examination room, the hospital seemed to be plunged into a sepulchral silence. The echo of the nurses' and doctors' footsteps reverberated through the corridors, creating a soundtrack of growing tension. The woman, however, remained still and serene, as if in a deep trance. Every movement was meticulously controlled, her rigid and expressionless posture amplifying the sense of discomfort around her. She was placed on the stretcher with the same disturbing indifference she had displayed since her arrival. The doctors exchanged nervous glances, trying to understand how someone in such a state could remain so impassive. One of the doctors, summoning courage, approached to begin the examination. He tried to establish some form of communication, but the woman continued to stare into the void, her eyes fixed on a non-existent point. Not a muscle of her perfect face moved, as if frozen in time. The nurses, now visibly anxious, murmured among themselves, questioning the origin of this strange patient. The feeling that something terrible was about to happen hung in the air, making each second more unbearable. The head doctor, out of options, decided it was best to wait for the authorities, hoping they could shed some light on this mystery. Meanwhile, the woman remained an unsettling enigma, her presence carrying an implicit promise of even more disturbing revelations. The tension was almost tangible, and everyone in the room felt they were on the verge of discovering something extraordinary and terrifying. As the doctors and nurses struggled to maintain their composure, the atmosphere in the examination room was about to become even more sinister. The woman lay on the stretcher, motionless like a statue, her expression unchanged and her eyes fixed on a distant point. The head doctor, sweating cold, decided it was time to attempt some sort of intervention. He approached slowly, trying to avoid any sudden movements that might disturb the enigmatic figure. With trembling hands, he began to prepare the instruments for the examination. At that moment, something unexpected happened. The woman, who had been completely passive until then, moved with terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, she turned her head at an impossible angle, as if she had no bones in her neck. The horror in the eyes of those present was palpable. Before anyone could react, The woman opened her mouth, revealing something straight out of a nightmare. Instead of teeth, she had rows of sharp metallic spikes, too long to be contained in her mouth without piercing her own gums. The grotesque sight made one of the nurses scream and back away, knocking over a tray of medical instruments onto the floor. The metallic clatter echoed through the room, intensifying the sense of dread. The woman, however, seemed unfazed by the others' reactions. Her expression remained unchanged, cold and inhuman. She slowly turned to the head doctor, her black eyes locking onto his. A chill ran down everyone's spine. Not knowing what to do, the head doctor tried to formulate a question, but the words failed to come out of his mouth. The woman, with terrifying calmness, began to rise from the stretcher. Her movements were fluid, almost supernatural, and each step she took towards the doctor seemed to carry an implicit threat. Meanwhile, the sounds of hurried footsteps and anxious voices could be heard outside the room. Hospital security was approaching quickly, but no one knew if they would arrive in time to prevent what was about to happen. The head doctor, paralyzed by fear, watched as the woman approached with movements that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Her black, empty eyes fixed on him, conveying a sense of absolute void. Each step she took towards him seemed to echo through the hospital corridors, heightening the tension with every moment. The nurses and doctors around were immobile, as if terror had frozen them in place. No one knew what to do, how to react to that terrifyingly calm and relentless presence. The woman stopped a few centimeters from the doctor, leaning in slightly. Her face, still expressionless, was close enough for him to feel the cold emanating from her skin. She opened her mouth again, and the doctor had to fight the instinct to recoil. Instead of words, a chilling whisper emerged from her lips. "Goodbye," she said, with a voice that seemed to come from an endless abyss. The word, simple and common, carried an immense weight of threat and mystery. The doctor, feeling his legs weaken, fell to his knees. Absolute terror had taken over his body, and he could barely breathe. The woman then, as if she had fulfilled her purpose, began to move away, her movements as fluid as before. The examination room door creaked open, revealing the security guards who had finally arrived. The sight of the guards brought no relief to those present. On the contrary, the tension only increased. They entered cautiously, weapons drawn, ready for anything. But the woman, unhurried, continued to walk out of the room, disappearing down the hospital corridors. The guards, confused and uneasy, followed her, while the doctors and nurses remained where they were, trying to process what had just happened. The hospital, now in complete turmoil, prepared for the next act of this terrifying mystery. As the woman walked away, the security guards hesitated between following her and helping the doctors and nurses still paralyzed with fear. She moved through the hospital corridors with the same supernatural calm, her slender figure disappearing into the darkness of the less-lit corners. Each step she took seemed to echo like a dark omen. The security guards, recovering from the initial shock, finally decided to act. They ran through the corridors, trying to catch up with the woman who seemed to glide through the hospital like a ghost. But no matter how hard they tried, she always seemed to be one step ahead, as if she knew every nook and secret passage. Meanwhile, in the examination room, the head doctor struggled to stand. His legs still trembled, and sweat poured down his forehead. The other doctors and nurses tried to regain their composure, exchanging looks of pure fear and confusion. No one could understand what had just happened or how to deal with it. The sound of the security guard's footsteps running through the corridors finally ceased. There was a moment of absolute silence before one of the guards returned, the expression on his face making it clear they had not been able to find the woman. She had disappeared as if she had never existed, leaving behind only a trail of fear and mystery. In the days that followed, the hospital was in turmoil. Reports of the incident spread quickly, filling the corridors with uneasy murmurs. Some said she was a vengeful spirit, others speculated about macabre scientific experiments, but no one knew for sure. The security footage was reviewed countless times, and every time the cameras captured the woman's image, it was as if the technology itself was seized by fear. The recording showed only a nebulous, blurred figure walking with terrifying grace through the corridors. Despite all efforts to uncover the mystery, the woman's identity and origin were never discovered. The doctors and nurses who witnessed the scene were never the same, forever carrying the memory of that disturbing night. And so, the legend of the woman in the white dress became a dark tale told in the hospital corridors, a warning about the unfathomable mysteries that can hide in plain sight. The fear of the unknown persisted, and the feeling that she could return at any moment haunted the thoughts of everyone who had been there that fateful night. And, somewhere in the shadows, perhaps she was still watching, waiting for the right moment to reappear.